From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana.
I've led an incredible life in that, and something you reflect on when you're in the situation I am. Before I was extradited, I had to say goodbye to everything and everyone. I didn't know if I'd ever be coming back.
Last month, in his first interview after being acquitted of criminal charges that could have seen him die in prison, the British tech tycoon Mike Lynch spoke to Danny Fortson on the Times podcast Danny in the Valley. He described how he felt when he was being extradited to the US, where the chances of him winning his trial were tiny, just half of 1%.
And funny things like you look at your childhood toys that you've still got lying around, and so when I was talking about knowing that the end is coming, that's the point. You're in a situation where you get to, so for example, in the run-up to trial, I just went through all the old photographs, the whole set, and just, looking at all those days, and my God, weren't the 70s naff and all that sort of stuff, And so now it's very strange, you have a new life.
Mike Lynch was still working that out when in the early hours of Monday morning, his plans were cut short. Lynch, his family and close friends had been celebrating his newfound freedom on his super yacht, cruising just off the coast of Sicily. Locals on the mainland describe seeing the yacht all lit up, twinkling in the sea. At 4 a.m, it was there, lighting up the sky around it. By 4:30, it had vanished into the darkness. A freak storm hit the boat and it sank within minutes. In the days since, divers have been searching for 6 missing passengers, including Lynch. Yesterday, bodies were recovered from the shipwreck. After beating inconceivable odds to gain his freedom, how did it come to this? The story today, the tragedy of Mike Lynch and the sunken yacht.
So my name's Katie Prescott and I'm technology business editor at The Times. And I've been covering the recent criminal trial of Mike Lynch in the States.
Katie, as someone who's followed that trial and has followed the career of Mike Lynch for years, describe the moment when you heard he was missing.
It was absolutely shocking. My phone lit up with people who were just utterly bewildered by the news. It's only 2 months since he was found not guilty in a criminal trial in the States after having fought charges of fraud for the last 12 years. There was an expectation from the tech community here in the UK that he was going to come back and be reintroduced into the British business world, into the tech community. We'd invited him to speak at the next Times Tech Summit, which is happening in October.
Wow.
People were, I think, completely flabbergasted.
Katie, take us back to Sunday evening. What do we know about what exactly happened to Mike Lynch's yacht?
It's incredibly sad because on the yacht, he'd brought together people who'd worked with him through his trial as a celebration. He was finally free and had brought together colleagues, including his attorney from the trial, Chris Mavillo, and one of his daughters and his wife. And they were enjoying time sailing around the Aeolian Islands off the coast of Sicily. That evening, one of the passengers put a picture on Instagram taken from the deck of the yacht, showing a classic idyllic holiday scene, calm blue seas, orange skies, and a sunset. And yet within hours, there was a freak storm, and this idyllic holiday, as I say, meant to be a celebration from them all, turned into the stuff of nightmares.
What do we know about what happened with this storm?
So in the press, I mean, we've been referring to this as a tornado, I don't think you can get tornadoes in the water. It's actually a water spout, which is a very rare form of a tornado. And it pulled at the aluminium mast of this super yacht owned by Mike Lynch.
And it did have a very, very tall aluminium mast, I think one of the biggest.
I think that's right, one of the world's tallest, 248 feet or so. And that caused the boat to keel over and take on water. And so passengers who were asleep, being very early in the morning, got trapped in their cabins. Now, we have heard from one of the passengers, who's a lady called Charlotte Galunsky, who actually worked for Invoke Capital, which was an investment fund Mike Lynch set up. And she had to save her 1-year-old daughter, holding her above her head as the water raged around her.
She has told the Repubblica newspaper in Italy, it's pitch dark, the boat is going under, there's screaming, there's crying, you can't see anything. And she's trying to just hold her baby. I mean, the love of a mother, the love of a parent at that point, holding her baby. Thankfully, she survived, the baby survived.
How much of a freak accident is this? I mean, do you get these water spouts happening very often?
We've been hearing from various people on this, and the chairman of the Maritime Search and Rescue Council, Matthew Shank, has said it should not have caused the super yacht to sink.
It's sort of unprecedented, really, to have a vessel of that size being certified and commercially operated to suffer such a significant event, really, in weather that was pretty severe by all accounts, but should have been within the limits of the vessel itself.
Other boats in the area seem to have been unaffected by it.
So, Katie, you mentioned one of Mike Lynch's employees who managed to escape and managed to save her 1-year-old daughter too. Tell us about some of the people who didn't make it.
Hannah Lynch, Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, was due to start a degree in English at Oxford University in September. Friends who knew her have told us that she was far more than just a rich man's daughter. She was a staunch feminist, highly intelligent, an intelligence that she got from her father and mother, incredibly bright people, that she was a supernova. That's what they've said to us. Chris Mavillo, who was Mike Lynch's attorney, I spoke to many times during the trial. He was an incredibly funny, nice, engaging lawyer, a partner at Clifford Chance, based in New York. Always had time for journalists. One of these very, very busy trials where he's got a lot going on. He would take the time always to explain tiny nuances of law to me that I didn't understand in a very simple and human way. And I've spoken to some partners at Clifford Chance who say they're utterly devastated by the news. And then Jonathan Bloomer, chair at Morgan Stanley, who was a long-standing friend of Mike Lynch, and he was on board with his wife.
Katie, this is such a huge tragedy. Just stepping back, tell us a bit about the man in the middle of it all, Mike Lynch. Take us back to the start of his career. Where was he from? What do we know about how he made it in the tech world?
So he was born in Essex, the son of a fireman from Ireland and a nurse. And he was spotted to be very bright from an early age. And apparently his dad always said to him, and this is something he used to trot out in interviews all the time.
I think it was a couple of things. So first of all, my father gave me wonderful advice, which is when you grow up, try and get a job that doesn't involve running into burning buildings. And that made sense to me.
I mean, he had a point.
And he did exactly that. I don't think you could do anything perhaps less burning buildings than working in software. Anyway, he won a scholarship to a private day school in London and later a place at Cambridge. And during his trial, he spoke very movingly about the experiences that he used to have working with his mum in the holidays. He used to go around hospitals, he said, pushing the trolley and working as a porter. And he said that was a very humanising experience, getting to know all of the different patients from all walks of life. And he said that was a very formative time for him. But when he was at Cambridge, he attributed a lot of his success to the fact that he wasn't from the establishment, right? So he was in an environment in the 1980s where, there'd be lots of public school people there and people who expected to do certain jobs. And he could think outside the box because he wasn't like that. There was no expectation that he would go into a career in accountancy or in the law. And so he was kind of interested in tech, and he was a bit of a science geek. And then he set up a business basically doing fingerprint recognition for the police. So there's all ways of kind of analysing data and helping the police to filter out fingerprints and search them and catch murderers, basically, was how he would describe the business. And then autonomy, which spun out of this company, was a way of analysing corporate data. So it sounds kind of weird to us because we're so used to Google right now.
Yeah.
Kind of search being easy, and now ChatGPT. But in those days, in the early days of kind of data processing and the internet, that wasn't the case. But it's very easy to search a spreadsheet, isn't it? If you've got numbers in certain columns and you can kind of know what you're looking for. But what autonomy did was allow companies to search through emails and voicemails and sort of a morass of information.
Wow.
Which wasn't in nice, neat lines, and analyse it from there.
I mean, that does sound very cutting edge. Even now, that feels pretty impressive. How successful was it?
Some people in the tech world have referred to Mike Lynch as Britain's answer to Bill Gates. It's incredibly rare for tech entrepreneurs here in the UK to build sizable companies. And yet we have someone who, when he founded Autonomy, a software business in 1996, grew a business so big that it listed on the FTSE 100. And then it grew so much that it had a footprint in the US and in the UK. I mean, its height, it had about 20,000 clients. If you can think of any big company around the world, all of the top banks, the BBC, even the Vatican, using
used them.
Autonomy software.
Wow.
In 2010, it was turning over £1 billion a year.
Wow. I mean, that is huge. What did that success do for his profile?
It meant that he became a member of an establishment that was very far removed from his upbringing. So he was on the board of the BBC. He was a science advisor to David Cameron. He was on the board of the British Library. So suddenly he really had a footprint in some of Britain's biggest organisations. And he was incredibly well respected as a result, not only as a chief executive of FTSE listed business, which comes with its own kudos, but as someone who actually built that business from scratch.
What was he like as a person? I know you've met him.
I would say he was a bit of a Marmite figure. There are those who worked for him who found him very difficult. He was clearly incredibly driven. He worked very, very hard and expected that work ethic of everybody around him. He was quite eccentric, had a very British sense of humour. So one of the things that he had in his early business was a sign on a door saying authorised personnel only. And he used to joke it would make people think that the company was bigger than it was. You could stick that on a broom cupboard, no one would go in, but they might presume there's 20 people working behind that door.
Oh,
and
wow.
he took that motif and put it in all of his company offices, right? Which is quite a kind of British quirky thing to do.
Yes, very quirky.
He was passionate about James Bond and kept a piranha tank.
A piranha tank?
In the reception area of Autonomy's headquarters. The meeting rooms were named after James Bond villains. Someone who knows him, and I don't know if this is true, but it's a great story, says that he owned Oddjob's hat.
Oh, wow.
He had a mansion in Suffolk where he bred rare breed cattle that kind of fallen out of favour as we make more efficient. He would look back to kind of ancient forms and found it interesting to breed those. He was a scientist, a tech geek. His yacht was called Bayesian after Thomas Bayes, a mathematician from the 18th century. So that hopefully gives you a picture of the man. Hugely intelligent, passionate about science, quite quirky, but incredibly driven.
So, Katie, you've described how Mike Lynch built up this business from scratch. It becomes hugely successful. It's turning over $1 billion a year. And then things start to go wrong. Just tell us what happened.
It was bought itself by Hewlett-Packard, who most people know for printers and ink cartridges and computers, in 2011 for almost $9 billion. And the deal was done by a German-French chap called Leo Apotheker, who had just come into HP and felt that the future of technology was not in hardware, wasn't in printers and ink, it was in software. You can make a lot more money in software. If you're manufacturing a physical product, it can be quite expensive. He made the offer for autonomy and then was pushed out of HP himself. So because of UK takeover rules, the deal had to continue and go ahead. In the meantime, a new chief executive was parachuted into HP, and this was Meg Whitman. Now, Meg Whitman had been a chief executive of eBay. She's a staunch Republican, campaigned for governor of California. She's currently the US ambassador to Kenya. And her and Mike did not get on at all. Quite the understatement. There was a real personality clash there. And not only was there a personality clash, she really didn't believe in the autonomy acquisition. And so Mike Lynch used to describe the acquisition of autonomy by HP as like autonomy being an unwanted stepchild. Wasn't integrated properly. HP didn't follow through on some of the promises to staff, so there was an exodus of staff. And it was an unloved, unwanted stepchild that started to perform badly as a result. That's what Mike Lynch said. Meg Whitman said that autonomy, driven by Mike Lynch, had made its accounts look a lot better than they were in order to make HP pay over the odds for the business. And a year after it was bought, she'd pushed Mike out, went on TV, and HP issued a statement and said that they were accusing autonomy of fraud. And that was the first that Mike Lynch knew about it. He went on Channel 4 that evening to refute the allegations.
Scariest thing I've ever done in my life was to get on Channel 4 News live over here on when this broke. And, they cut us off at the knees, but they didn't kill us.
And he always said it was really difficult because he just hadn't got sight of what was going to happen. Suddenly this kind of bombshell was dropped and he was left fighting these claims of fraud that he didn't know what exactly they were. And that moment in 2012 was the start of this 12-year saga that just overshadows him and his young daughters, who basically lived out their teenage years with their father facing these allegations of fraud.
How did that play out? Tell us a bit about the legal process that followed.
It was incredibly complicated. So there was a trial here in the UK, a civil trial, which found Mike Lynch and his chief financial officer, Sushavan Hussain, guilty of fraud in one of what the judge said was just the most complex trials he'd ever overseen, with reams and reams of documents and witnesses. It led to a record fine at the time for Deloitte as the auditors of autonomy, as the Financial Reporting Council found that they hadn't done their job properly. And then the US, the DOJ, wanted to extradite Lynch. The Serious Fraud Office here, though, I should say, looked into it and they said there wasn't enough evidence to go further. So you've got all of these bodies kind of poring over whether there was financial impropriety.
And the difference is that then becomes a criminal case. What he'd faced and lost in Britain was a civil case. This is much more serious if it's criminal.
That's correct. And particularly because the odds really were stacked against him when he went to America. And I'm afraid that's the punchline. As we know, he did end up going to America after fighting extradition for a very long time. Priti Patel signed off on him being extradited to the States last year.
So, the Met Police rang up and were very nice and said, to come and get you. And, would you like us to come round? We'll wait round the corner so we don't have to do it in front of your family.
Right.
So it's fine. Okay, so I get in the car and they're very nice and then nice chat, go to the airport, have a cup of tea, wait for the US Marshals, etc. And then I get handed over, and within minutes I'm in chains, even though I'm in an airplane.
In chains?
In chains in the back of an aeroplane.
And he was taken to California and put under house arrest with security guards that he had to pay for himself.
The next day got bail on this rather interesting basis of having armed security guards.
That you had to pay for, right?
Yeah, which on the one hand, I'm very pleased I got bail. On the other hand, it seems very unfair to anyone that can't afford it.
So he ended up in the States, and bear in mind, there's still a mess going on in the UK. Although he was found guilty in the civil trial, he did plan to fight against that. The damages still haven't been issued for that. So for us watching in the UK, I have to say, we didn't hold out much hope for him.
Just tell us what he was facing in the US.
So less than 0.5% of those trials come to a not guilty verdict. His chief financial officer had already been found guilty by the same judge.
Oh, wow.
And been sent to prison for 5 years. And then bearing in mind the verdict in the civil case, it did feel like he was walking in to the lion's den when he was sent to America. And he was facing a 25-year jail sentence, which potentially could mean the rest of his life. He was 59 and had health issues. So that was staring down the barrel of a gun.
I mean, that's terrifying.
And then there was this extraordinary trial, which in many ways was quite boring when you're talking about going over the details of accounting.
Yeah.
But there were some great moments when he stood up and talked about his own story, how he got to become the chief executive of Autonomy, what it was like running the company, and picking apart some of the specific allegations that were made about him. And the jury came back, and I remember the not guilty verdict came out, and I think there was a collective gasp around the British tech world, quite frankly. It was really quite extraordinary.
Just going back to acquittal day, what was the reaction of your family and your daughters?
The reaction of everyone was to burst into tears. I've never seen, can't remember if you were in the room when it happened, but
I was not. There was
literally, the 20 associates that work on it who are, all bright young things in their sort of 20s to 30s. Everyone burst into tears, So no, the emotion was amazing.
And he said in an interview he did with the Sunday Times, this was a new lease of life for him. He was really looking forward to coming back and working on some of the startups and investing in tech and the developments that have been going on in AI, which have been absolutely extraordinary to watch. He was delighted to be getting back to his family after so much time away.
There's all the things you've missed, the holidays. So I made a decision I wasn't going to stop them going on holiday. I couldn't travel. So there's those sort of things as well. But
right.
But hopefully there'll be some time to catch up with those things. And the bigger one is the question you asked earlier, which is given the knowledge I now have that most people fortunately don't, what do I do with that?
He really wanted to start looking at injustices and people who were convicted unfairly. And he felt that there were several projects in America which look at that issue and that something could be done here in Britain about that. And, the horror of spending the rest of your life in prison in America, away from your friends and family. He'd said goodbye to his friends and family when he left the UK because he thought he might never be coming back. And suddenly, he had the rest of his life ahead of him.
You just have to put everything in order for the family. And so, yes, it's a very strange situation to now be in a different mindset where you're back. I stood on Piccadilly the other day, which has the most enormous permanent traffic jam, just thinking this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's bizarre.
And Katie, this tragedy has cut all of that short. But at the same time, there was a tragedy taking place here in Britain too.
I don't even know where to begin. I mean, this is so surprising. I say there was a shock when we found out about Mike Lynch missing. Stephen Chamberlain, who was Autonomy's vice president of finance, was killed after being hit by a car when he was out running on Saturday. So you've got the two men who were on trial and acquitted, was also killed. It's It's extraordinary. And I'm afraid there are lots of conspiracy theories flying around about it, as you can imagine. Nothing at all substantiated, I should say.
No.
But it is a remarkable situation.
What do we know about the car accident?
The lady who was driving it is helping the police with their inquiries. And as we speak, there's been no arrest.
Katie, what do you think Mike Lynch's legacy will be? How will he be remembered? How will autonomy be remembered?
I'm afraid autonomy is always going to be tainted by this scandal. It's quite hard to say the name in the tech world without people remembering rather than the good stuff it did.
Yeah.
But Mike Lynch's energy and inspiration as an entrepreneur, I think, lives on in the tech world in the UK. And he had a very practical impact in funding a number of very successful businesses. I mean, at a very human level, you've got someone who was about to get a chance to start their life over again, who wanted to use his experience of going through what he'd been through for the greater good. And you don't have to do that, do you? You know, he could quite easily have taken his riches and just kind of buried his head in the sand. But he absolutely did not want to do that. And it just seems incredibly unfair.
That was Katie Prescott, Technology Business Editor at The Times. You can read all of Katie's articles on Mike Lynch and autonomy at thetimes.com. We'll also put a link in the episode notes to the full interview with Mike Lynch on our sister podcast, Danny in the Valley, hosted by Danny Fortson from the Sunday Times. It's a really moving listen, and I'd recommend it. The producers today were Sam Chantarasak and Taryn Siegel. The executive producer was Edward Drummond. Sound design was by Tom Birchall, and the theme was composed by Mal Lassetto. If you can, please do leave us a review. It'll help others to find us. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.